Welcome to the tutorial basics. So in this tutorial we're going to show you a little bit about how to work with the timeline in terms of animating. So how to create keyframes, how to create new drawings, how to create motion tweening or interpolation, all of that stuff. So if you're used to using Flash, you are probably used to seeing keyframes locked in together with drawings. You can't manipulate drawings separately from keyframes and vice versa. However, in Animate Pro, it's just the opposite. You can manipulate the exposure of drawings independently from the position keyframes. So, for example, I could have several keyframes that go on beyond where there's a drawing that exists. I mean, it wouldn't do anything, you wouldn't see anything because there's no drawing there, but you could do that. You can have drawings, drawing swaps, so a different drawing one right after the other in the same row for the same layer, and then you can have this type of motion tweening or interpolation occur between the two drawings. An example would be is if I took a profile view of this rabbit and he's walking along, and then I have to use motion tweening and all sorts of things like that to create the swinging of his arms, the movement of his feet, and then all of a sudden his head moves to look our way as he's walking. Well, you can have that drawing swap and still have an interpolated movement happening at the same time, so it's not a problem. So let's go down to something that is easy to look at. Put this guy in the background. That right now just has a row of drawings. So Mountain 2, except for this first keyframe, really just has drawings all the way down, and it's the same drawing. And we know this because if we do something like this, and then we move down the timeline, that squiggle exists for every single one of these cells because every single one of these cells contains the same drawing. So let's undo that. However, if we did something like this, so if I click on this button that says duplicate drawing, now on one side of this line we have one drawing, and on this side we have another drawing. So this first drawing is held for 8 exposures, and we know that because we see on frame 8 here. So from 1 to 8 is drawing number 1, and from 9 to 60 we have drawing number 2. And so I'll give you the same test that I did before. So now if I draw a squiggly line on drawing number 2, as soon as I flip to drawing number 1, it's disappeared. But the advantage of duplicating a drawing, as you see, is that you can modify a drawing that already exists without affecting its previous drawing exposure. For example, if you had a drawing of the rabbit's hand and you wanted to delete the thumb and maybe change the angle of the hand, well, if you duplicated the drawing, what you would do is you would have, first of all, a base. You could change that drawing and not worry about the other places where the previous or original drawing has been exposed. And on top of that, you also retain the drawing pivot. So if we move the pivot to its wrist, it would be retained in this duplicate drawing. The moment that you would create a new drawing, so let's drag this down to frame 20 and make that selection. I'm just going to pull this red bar back as well. So the new drawing button is the first one in the timeline view toolbar. If we click on that, what we've done here is we've actually deleted our drawing because these are now empty cells. They no longer contain a drawing. So drawing 2 is here, drawing 1 is here, and there's nothing here in this new drawing cell. Not only is it empty, but it's also lost the pivot that belonged to drawing 2. So the pivot is now at the 0, 0 origin point. So on top of that, what we can also do is add keyframes. So the fastest and easiest way to add a keyframe is actually to click on this button here, which is the Insert Keyframe button, like that. So it's automatically a motion keyframe, which means tweening has been produced or interpolation has been produced between the first and the second keyframe. You can also create a keyframe by right-clicking and saying Insert Keyframe, or by using the keyboard shortcut Command F6 for Mac or Control F6 for Windows, like that. So I'll actually use the keyboard shortcut here. And then if I want to turn these motion keyframes into stop motion keyframes, I need only to click on this button here. So it's the 6th one down in the timeline view toolbar. And sometimes you have to actually click in an area where there's motion tweening or on the other keyframe, so this one right here. So that worked, or you can click on the tweening. That also works. And if you want to turn them back into motion keyframes, you can click on the keyframe and then use the 5th icon in the timeline view toolbar, set motion keyframe, like that, and it brings it back. To delete keyframes, you never use the delete button because I'll show you what happens when you do that. You actually made a hole in your timeline here, so you deleted the keyframe, but you also deleted the cell and the drawing contained in that cell. So we don't want to do that. To delete keyframes, you just right-click and you select delete keyframes, or you could use Shift F6 to delete them. You can also click on a keyframe and use the 4th button in the timeline view toolbar, delete keyframes. And you can also, I forgot to mention, insert keyframes and duplicate drawing. And you can do that by right-clicking and selecting insert keyframe and duplicate drawing. So if you do that, you get both. So that's it for the tutorial basics. Stay tuned for the next tutorial, creating a simple cutout animation, part 1.